Hi everyone, my name is Chris Walsh. I'm an embedded researcher within the Cathedral and Churches Building Division, and also a researcher at the University of Manchester in the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change. And I'm just today going to be telling you about the 12-month project that I am involved in with the CCB into climate resilient churches. Today I'm going to tell you a bit about why climate change resilience is really important and why we need to engage with it along with mitigation actions. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the climate is going to look like in terms of our churches and what the kind of actions we can take to protect our buildings and protect our communities are. And finally, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project that we're running and how you can be involved in that. So why do we talk about climate resilience alongside mitigation? The reality of climate change in this country and in the world is that we are already at a point where we have released so much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases that we have a certain amount of embedded change within the system. What this means, and this graph shows this quite simply, is that there is a point, and you can see it in the graph, where the red, green and blue lines diverge. There's a point we will get to, which is roughly 2050, where there is very little difference in what our climate's going to look like, regardless of the actions we take. Obviously, by the end of the century, there are going to be significant differences depending on the pathways. But until 2050, unfortunately, a lot of climate change things are locked in. So what does that mean for our churches and the communities that they're within? Well, we know climate change is going to be a year-round problem for churches. In the winter, the winters are going to be both warmer and wetter. That means we're going to have increased flood events through fluvial or river flooding, but it also means we're going to have increased snow and ice impacts, as well as high winds. In the summer, it's going to be hotter and drier, which means we're going to have more impact from heave and building stress. We're also going to have increased frequency of flash flooding, particularly in urban and concreted areas. And as you've also, I'm sure, seen from the news, there's going to be increased storm events, not just increasing in frequency, as we've seen recently, but also increasing in amplitude, which means in seriousness. So why do we need to deal with this now? The reality of climate resilience and preparing our buildings, particularly heritage buildings, is that there is a significant cost just to waiting until these problems happen. There's a figure that is commonly quoted in the heritage community that every pound you don't spend now will cost you £8 in 2050 in terms of repair and ongoing maintenance due to just climate related issues. So we need to start thinking about this process now. There are already loads of resources available for you to examine from the environment team in the Church of England, and I would really recommend that you go to the web address at the bottom of this slide or search for the Climate Resilient Church in Google. But there's 5 steps we're encouraging all churches to take, and also encouraging DACs to encourage churches to take. Number 1 is good maintenance. We want you to be on top of your maintenance and keeping the churches in as good a condition as they can to face whatever's going to happen. 2, we're encouraging you to identify risks that might happen to your church in particular. So that's looking at floodplains, that's looking at exposure to wind. 3, encouraging to plan ahead. So plan in actions, understand what might be happening in 20 years' time. 4, to communicate, both with us, with diocese, with other churches, and the project I'm doing is a big part of that. And 5, keep reviewing those documents, keep coming back to them, keep updating them as recommendations change, as you find new information. But in protecting our church buildings as well, we recognise that actually church buildings have a significant role to play in wider community resilience as well, meaning by protecting our church buildings and utilising our church buildings, we can also protect the people who live nearby there, not just congregants, but also community members who may be exposed to climate risks themselves, or their homes exposed to climate risks themselves. So what's the project that we're doing here? So what we're doing is we are gathering stories of climate resilience that's already taking place in churches. We recognise that within the church already churches are having to tackle with these issues, both in terms of reactive, but also in terms of taking action to prevent some of the impacts that climate change might bring. So we're currently in the process of gathering 20 different case studies from around England on churches that have started to deal with some form of climate resilience. And we are referring to 3 groups of churches here. So number 1 is the most common understanding of that. This is churches that have already suffered the impacts of climate change, whether that be flooding, whether that be storm damage, wind damage. Number 2, we're looking at churches that have acted in emergency response centres to climate events. So for instance, churches that have acted as bases for the emergency services during flood events or storm events. And thirdly, we're looking at churches that offer community resilience activities. So whether that be warm rooms when temperature's cold and those in fuel poverty can't afford it, or whether that be offering a cool space in the summer for people who are particularly exposed. So what I'd really like to encourage, if you know of any of these stories within your diocese or within your churches, please do get in contact. I'd love to talk to you and see whether that might fit with us and whether I might be able to come and interview you about them. The second part of this project is we're going to be running a series of 8 regional workshops around England as well. What these workshops are going to entail, they're going to entail training on climate resilience and how to deal with some of the issues that we're going to be facing, as well as more detail on what those impacts are going to be on church buildings. But we're also going to be using them as a chance to get your expertise into our guidance notes and our actions as the CCB and our advice that we give. So we're looking for 8 dioceses to host us to do those workshops. So if you would be interested in either attending or hosting a workshop, please also get in touch. We really want to hear these stories, and we really want to share these stories on our website and with others, so that other churches can see them, can see what actions churches have taken, what's gone right, what's gone wrong, and we can learn from that, and we can create together a more climate resilient community, both within the church and without it. So, as I say, please do get involved with this project. Project only works if we have people to talk to. So please send me an email at christopher.walsh@churchofengland.org and go to the Climate Resilient Church page for more information, not just on climate impacts, but also on this project. Thank you for listening to me.